welcome to another very exciting tutorial. Today we're going to use Apple's CloudKit service to create an app like Twitter, which we are going to call Swiffer. And this is going to be our app that we're going to create. And some of you might remember Swiffer as an app to demonstrate all of the functionalities that are provided by Parse. But as you also might know, Parse is going to retire early next year, so we have to use something else. And I think that CloudKit is a really promising service. When you have a look at the website of CloudKit, you see that you get public storage of up to 1 petabyte. You also get CloudKit JS to access your cloud database from different web services. And now Apple also added server-to-server web service requests. So also that is a great feature to get started with CloudKit. And if you go to the website, to the Apple developer website for CloudKit, you will also find this CloudKit dashboard link where you can sign up and sign into your CloudKit dashboard, which looks like this. And we're going to have a look at that later. But for now, let me just give you a quick look on how our Swiffer app really works. And there's only one plus button, which allows us to send something similar to a tweet, which we call a tweet. So let's say, hello, sweet world, and send that. And as you see, we do not need any sign up. We can just send our tweets to the world. And once I refresh my default zone in the public data area, you can see that here my tweet appears. And now I will also use my iPhone, send a test message, send that. And now I will refresh my Swiffer app by pulling to refresh. And there is my test tweet. Also, when I update my default zone here, you can see the test suite. I can delete it. I can refresh my Swiffer app, and there you go. Everything is connected. All the data is stored in the cloud. But how can you set it up? So first of all, what you need to do when you have created your Swiffer project, you can just select a single view application. Make sure to select your project and select the capabilities tab and turn on iCloud. This is the first thing to do. Second thing you need to do is selecting the CloudKit service. This will create a default container for you. It will add the CloudKit framework to your project, and also it will create the entitlements file, which is necessary in order for iCloud to work with your project. Everything like this red exclamation mark here says add the iCloud containers entitlement to your app ID. This is something you should do when you go into a production environment, but for now, for our development purpose, we won't need to set up an app ID. So let's have a look at how to create our Swiffer app using CloudKit. And I've already created my project. It's a single view application, nothing more. And we will start by creating the user interface. So make sure to open the storyboard, and we will remove the standard view controller here. Make sure to select it here and then just remove it. And instead, we're going to select a table view controller. This is the first thing we want to do. Second thing we want to do is selecting that table view controller. Click on the editor menu item and then tell it to embed in a navigation controller so that we can get a nice navigation bar. And then what we also need to do is selecting this first navigation controller and tell it to be the initial view controller in the attributes inspector. So make sure that this is selected, and then we can do some nice cosmetic stuff like adding Swiffer here. We also want to add our plus button, which is a bar button item. So let's type in bar button item here. Let's add it at the top right corner. Again, go to the attributes inspector, and the style is bordered, and system item add, and there we go. Then we can also select a nice color for our navigation bar. So make sure to select the navigation controller, the navigation bar, and then we can change the bar tint to a red color. Maybe this is a little too red. Let's choose another red, something like, maybe something like this. No, something like this. And then we can also make sure that the title color is going to be white. which we won't see actually in Interface Builder, but later once we are running the app, you will see this title white. And now let's also select our add button, also give this a white tint color. And so far for design purposes. Now let's make sure to select our table view controller and select the table view cell. And here we want to make sure that the style is not custom but subtitle. And also what we want to do is give our table view cell a reuse identifier, which we'll do here in the identifier area here, and we'll just type in cell so that we have a nice reuse identifier. Then we need to go ahead and remove our view controller that we have created by the template because we don't need it. So let's move that to trash, select the app delegate, press Command N, and then we will create a Suite table view or Suites table view controller. So Suites table view controller, hit next and create. And there we go. There we have our Suites table view controller. And the first thing we should do, since we're working with CloudKit, we should make sure to import the CloudKit framework so that we can work with that. And then what we want to do is go back to the storyboard again and create an IB action for our plus button. So let's bring up the assistant editor. And as you can see, our class, our Suites table view class is not yet displayed. So let's make sure to select our table view controller here and add a custom class in the identity inspector. So this is going to be the Suites table view controller. And now here we go. We have the assistant editor ready. And let's just control click on the plus button and drag to the to our code view here. Let's create an action and then let's say send suite and connect. And as you've seen in my little demonstration, what we want to do when sending a suite or preparing to send a suite, we want to display an alert view with a text field. And so what we want to do is create an alert view. So let's say let alert, which is going to be a UI alert controller. We're just going to get a title, let's say new suite, and a message, enter a suite. And the preferred style is alert in our case. And then we know we need a text field. So let's add one. So let's use the alert, add text field with configuration handler. And then we have this text field parameter here. And we can then use this configuration handler to, for example, set a placeholder text. So let's use the text field and the placeholder and tell it to say your suite. All right, so now we have a text field. Now we also need some buttons. And the most important one is actually the send button. So let's use the alert again and add an action, UI alert action. Title is going to be send, default style, and here's our handler for the alert action. And what we need to do now is first of all check if the text field is actually empty or not, so that we can really send the contents of the text field. So to get the text field, we will simply create a text field constant, use our alert object, and access the text fields array. So you can actually have multiple array text fields within your alert view. So we get an array of text fields back. And since we only have one text field in our only one text field in our alert view, we can simply assign the first one, and that's it. And we can also actually explicitly unwrap that here and continue and check if the text field and its text property is not equal to nothing, so that we have some text. We can do some exciting stuff. And here is actually where the CloudKit action happens. What we want to do is actually create a new suite object. And everything that we want to upload to CloudKit is called a record. So this is actually what we want to do now. We want to create a new record, and this is going to be a new suite. And the corresponding class for that is a CloudKit record, so CK record. And now we can specify a record type, and this is pretty cool. Works pretty similar to Parse as well. If you create the first object of that type, let's say suite, then this kind of record is also created in the dashboard, or in the cloud actually. And then you can, in the cloud, modify everything you need to do with this type of record. And we can, of course, also set up the type in the CloudKit dashboard and reuse it within our code. So we will now create our record type here. We will then assign some content. So we use the new suite. And since this works like working with a dictionary, we can actually create a key here, which we'll call content, and simply add the text field's text property. So the new suite gets a key called content, and we assign the content of the text field to go with our new suite. And to save it, we can now decide between public data and private data. So you can actually have public data where every user or everyone who has an iCloud account and using your app can get access. You can also get a private container or private cloud database only for a specific user. And this is really cool. But for now, we're going to use the public container. So let's say public data. And to get it, we will use the CK container class and the default container, and now access the public cloud database. And as you can see, there's also a private cloud database, but we will now use the public cloud database. And now everything we need to do is using our public data object and tell it to save a record. And then we will pass along our new suite as a record, and we get a completion handler. So for a record, and there's also an error. So all we need to do is actually check if error is equal to nil. And if that is the case, nothing went wrong, and we can actually begin doing some interesting stuff, like adding our new suite to the table view. But for now, we can have a look at this and see if that already works. And let's just add a print statement here. Suite saved. And then we should not forget to present our alert view and also add a cancel button. So add another action, UI alert action, title, cancel, cancel. No handler required here, and then self present, view controller, animated, so the alert animated, no completion handler necessary. And now let's give this a try and see what happens. So here we are, we have our Swiffer app, and as you can see, the title is in white, and we press on our plus button, and let's say hello world, and send that. Suite saved, and we go to our dashboard and have a look, and there we are. Now, what is interesting is how we can actually load data from our from CloudKit. So let's do that and populate our table view. Let's first of all create a load data function, which won't need any parameters. And again, what we need to do is create a public data object so that we can access the public data or the public cloud database. So let's again use CK container, default container, and public cloud database. Now, we can now create a query, but we should also think about where we want to put all of the data that we receive. And therefore, we will create a new property in our Suites table view controller class, which we will call Suites. So this is going to be an array of CK records. So let's initialize that, and every time we reload our data, we want also to clean this Suites the suites property. So let's call this again, CK record, and initialize it. So what we have here is simply an array of records. And now that we have this property, we can actually assign data. But CloudKit also needs to know what kind of data we actually want from our public cloud database. So we need to create a query. So let's create that by naming it query. And this is, of course, a CK query. So everything goes with CK, CloudKit query, CloudKit record, and so on. And what we want to do is a query for a record type with a predicate. So the record type we want to look for is, of course, the suite. And this predicate cannot be nil. We do not want to specify it anymore. We don't want to specify that our suites should begin with a capital A, or we want only suites from yesterday to tomorrow, or anything. We just want to display all of our suites that are stored in the public cloud database. So nonetheless, we have to create a predicate. So let's do that. And if you just want a predicate that gives you everything, what you can do is use the format true predicate, and therefore we will use this format true predicate and an argument array of nil. And there we go. Now we have a query that actually looks for every record of type suite. And to perform that query, all we need to do is use our public data and perform a query, which we have just created. The zone with ID, we can add nil here. And then we have a completion handler where we get an array of records. So this is going to be our results, and we also get an error object. So what we will now want to do is actually check if we do have results. So let's do that. If we have a object of suites, we will simply assign results here. Then what we can do is we can use our suites property and actually add the suites here. And then what we also want to do is refresh our table view. So since this is going to be reflected on the user interface, and this is running in the background, we have to perform that on the main thread. So let's use dispatch asynchronously, and you get the here dispatch get the main queue. So this is going to be performed on the main thread, and what we want to do is access our table view and reload data. And later we will also add some code here for our pull to refresh gesture to work. But for now, we can be sure that our data is now in our suites property. So we have an array of suites that we can use. And now to use them, we should also be sure to load the data. Let me remove these comments here. We will call load data and view.load so that we can directly access the data we need. And then we should think about the table view delegate methods of table view delegate and the table view data source. And what we know is, first of all, that we can remove those warnings here. And what we know is that the number of sections in our table view is going to be 1. And we can count the number of suites in our array to determine how many rows we're going to need. So how can we configure our cells? So first of all, we have to find another reuse identifier. We've called it cell. And now what we can do is we can check if the suites are equal to 0. So we have actually no suite. We can simply return an empty cell. But if we have suites, then we can actually create a suite object. We can use our suites array and use the index path .row to access it. And then we can check if there is actually content. So let's see if suite content is equal to suite. And then we will access using the key, like using a dictionary, and we have called it content. And then we'll cast that to a string. And since we also want the date to be displayed when the suite was actually sent, we need to create a date format, a date formatter. So n is date formatter. And now let's specify the date format which is going to be mm/dd/yyyy. Let's build that for a second. What's the problem here? Data format. I wrote data format. We should call it date. All right, so now we have a date format, and then we can create a date string using the capabilities of the date format class. And all we need to do now is using the date format and say string from date. And then we can simply use the suite and its creation date, since this creation date, we have to unwrap it, is part of every CK record object. So now we have the suite content, we have the date string, and that means that we can use the cell and its text label and text to assign the suite content, and we also can use the detail text label .text and assign the date string. And we can only use the detailed text label because we have, when you remember in the storyboard, we have told the table view cell to be of type, or the style is subtitle, and this gives us this detail text label. So this is going to load the information we require. So let's have a look and see what happens. And there we go, we crash. So let's see what's the problem. Unable to parse the format string true predicate, and I think there's a typo in there. So let's head back. Turi. So let's call it true predicate, and let's do this again. And now here we go. So we have hello sweet world and hello world. But as you might remember, I have, if we wanted to be like Twitter, the hello world I wrote later, so it should be at the top. And to make that happen, we actually have to sort our results, and therefore we can use so-called sort descriptors. And to do that, we will now again go back to our load data function, and what we want to do here is we want to use the query and add sort descriptors, or one sort descriptor. And as you can see, it requires an array. So let's provide it with an array and create a sort descriptor. So an ns sort descriptor with a key and an ascending parameter, and the key is going to be creation date, and it should not be ascending. And for this to work, when you have created, or when you have wrote your first suite and uploaded it to the cloud, you should go back to your dashboard and go to the record types that you have created. And then there is a suite and the users, and then you need to make sure that date created, the sort and query checkbox are activated, so that you can actually use a sort descriptor to sort through all of your suites that you have created. So this is all we need to do. So let's run this again and see if we have the correct order. And there you can see the newest version is saved at the top. And now let me add another test from my iPhone. Let's we have not implemented pull to refresh yet, so let's see when I restart if the test is also here, and there we go. So we are effective immediately connected to the cloud, and this is really cool. So let's now also implement the pull to refresh gesture to complete this app. And to do that, we will have to create a new property. Let's call it refresh. And this is going to be a UI refresh control. And here we go. And we have to now initialize it in view.load. So let's say refresh is going to be a UI refresh control. And let's give it some attributes. So attribute title is going to be an NS attributed string. And the string is going to be pull to load suites, for example. And then we will have to create a new target here. So let's target self. The selector that we want to use is load data. and we want this for the control event value changed. And then all we need to do is use our table view, add a subview, and this is going to be the refresh view. And now, as I've already told you, what we need to do here, when we have loaded all of the data, then we can use our refresh control and tell it to end refreshing. And what we also should consider, once we create a new suite, and this is what we want to do here, when we save the suite, we want to directly add it to our table view. So we need to access our table view, tell it to begin updates, and then we need our suites array and insert the new suite at index 0, so that is always on the top. And then we have to create a new index path. So and its index path for row and section. So we want it to be at the top. So for the row 0 and the section 0, and then we can use our table view and insert row at index paths, and then we have to specify an array here using our index path, and let's use the row animation top so that it bumps in from the top, and then at the end we have to end updates with our table view. And now, since we want to perform that, this is a user interface event, so we also need to perform that on the main thread. So let's select everything we just wrote, cut it, and again dispatch this asynchronously, get the main queue, and insert that code within that block so that it will be performed on the main thread. Let's also add a little else statement here so that we can print errors if something terrible occurred, so that we will know about it. And I think this should be it. So let's run our application, add a new suite. So here we go, send it, and it should bump in from the top. This works quite nicely. Then I will write a new suite here, like hello, send it, and then we will pull to load suites, and there is hello. And the last test what we can perform is actually go back to our default zone and, for example, remove the hello suite, and there we go. Very good. So now just a little explanation at the end. It is important to know that everyone who wants to use your app, when you use CloudKit, the person who wants to use your app needs to be signed up to iCloud, and also needs to be signed in on the particular device that your app is going to be installed on. So it's also important that when you want to test that you go to the settings and actually enter your iCloud credentials into the settings app. Otherwise, you cannot test your app. And this is actually everything you need to consider. Almost everyone is using iCloud when they're using an iPhone, so it's a very, very good way to enable cloud features. So have fun using CloudKit with this simple but really nice example.